want to ask a few questions about Korach. So Korach is complaining, and somehow we get complaint week in and week out. We're kind of sick of it. Like Hobbes, I want to complain about all this complaining. But I think Korach's complaint takes a very specific iteration that I want us to pay attention to. The first line, I'm in Hobbes' song. Okay. The first line is already mysterious and confusing. It says, and Korach, the son of Yitzhar, son of Kahat, son of Levi, took, and Datan Aviram, the son of Eliav, and On ben Pelet, son of Reuven. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi, v'Datan v'Aviram, b'nei Eliav, v'On ben Pelet ben b'nei Reuven. What's missing? What did he take? He took. What did he take? There's no object for the verb. It's a very strange, unfinished sentence in the Torah. Hobbes, what do you think? What did Korach take? So maybe he just took all these 250 men with him to go talk to Moses. That's a great piece of commentary. But still, we still need to ask, why doesn't the Torah tell us this? So put that question on hold for a moment. And I want us to look a little bit at Korach's lineage as we try to understand who this Korach character is. Now, as Hobbes told us, Korach was an older cousin of Moses and Aaron. And he's specifically from the Kahat family, right? That's the family of the larger Levite tribe that he's part of. And this Kahat family had a very interesting job. They were part of the kind of Moshe movers, right? You know those big trucks that you see? Those moving trucks. And it was their job to move all the things in the sanctuary from place to place. But there was one thing they couldn't do. They couldn't touch the holy objects until the priests wrapped them up. They couldn't have direct contact with the holy objects. These things were so sacred that the Kohatites were not permitted to fetch them out of their places themselves. And in fact, if they did, they might die. As it says, when Aaron and his sons, this is in Numbers 4, have finished covering the sacred objects and all the furnishings of the sacred objects at the breaking of camp, only then shall the Kohatites come and lift them so that they do not come in contact with the sacred objects and die. So any student of the Torah, anyone who reads these portions week in and week out, know that while holiness is essential for life, it can also be extremely dangerous. So like standing at Mount Sinai, if you come too close, right? If the Israelites touch the mountain, they might die. And this Mishkan, this sanctuary, is a replication of Mount Sinai. And the holiness is so intense that if you touch it the wrong way, if the Kohatites touch the unwrapped holy objects, they could die. So you can imagine this guy, Korach, being upset. Why do Aaron and Moses' family, why do the priests get to touch the holy objects, but his family can't? So here's his complaint, and now maybe it makes sense. He says to Moshe and Aaron, Rav lachem, you have too much. Ki chol ha'edah kulam kedoshim. Because everyone here is holy. I'm not less holy than you. I want equal access to holiness. I want to be egalitarian when it comes to holiness. It sounds reasonable, doesn't it? And they say, Kulam kedoshim ubtucham Adonai. And in their midst is Adonai, is God. Umadua titnasu al Adonai. And why do you raise yourselves up over the rest of the congregation? It's true. If you read the Torah, you understand the priests had an elevated role. They can come into contact with uncovered holiness. And it's also true that God's holiness and God's presence lived amongst the Israelites, right? There was access to holiness and to God for every single person, but it was not equal access. So Korach is clearly envious. Korach wants what Aaron and Moses have. You have too much, he says. In his eyes, they have more and he has less. Now, this is kind of a familiar complaint. We all feel sometimes that someone's too entitled, someone in power shouldn't walk around and be so arrogant. We often complain about leaders and we don't like how they wield their power, right? Does that sound familiar? But I think what's happening with Korach here is he's trying to tear them down as he tries to minimize their power as he tries to maximize his own, right? It's not, as Hab said, for the sake of heaven. It's not for the sake of community. It's like, I feel little, so I'm going to make you little so I can feel a little bit bigger. And just to be clear, I think there is a place for complaint. There's a place for complaint, the kind of complaint, as Hab said, for the sake of heaven. Are we complaining for the sake of the greater good? Are we trying to build something with our complaints instead of tearing something down? So this sense of envy is an ancient spiritual malady. And I think in our times, it's reached a kind of interesting apex. I think that social media has made this kind of envy much, much worse. Did you ever look at Facebook or Instagram or TikTok and say, oh my God, that person has the perfect life? Like, why do they have so much and I have so little? And I know people who won't even look at Facebook because it feels so toxic in that way. A young family member said to me recently that a certain girl on Instagram, her life was so glamorous, her life was so glitzy, and she's really a beautiful girl. And I know, because I know her family and her parents, that she had been in a horrible accident and was like struggling and suffering all these months. But all that was shown on Instagram was the glamour and the glitz, right? It's as we hear in the 12-step program, like, don't compare your insides to someone else's outsides, right? And that whole notion of compare and despair, I think it's rampant. So what's challenging for Korach right now in living his own life? Like, why does he want Moshe and Aaron's life? Why does he want more? So if you think about the last Parsha, right? That was the Parsha where there was a sin of the spies and all of Israel was relegated to die, or all of Israel over 20 years was relegated to die in the wilderness, right? So it's now a kind of grief-infused society. They're going to be traveling through the wilderness for 40 years and never see the promised land. So you can imagine that Korach is mad. You can imagine Korach wants a way out, and for Korach, the way is complaint. I know how that is. It's kind of the perfect escape. Instead of living in what we are and who we are, we wish we had what someone else had. And yet, I think there is real power in owning our own lives, in all its particularity, in all its specific circumstances. Maybe sometimes the relentlessness of specificity, right, where we feel sometimes trapped, maybe that's actually an opportunity. Maybe through navigation or strategy, we can figure out how to make our dreams come true despite all the limits and barriers, or through them, because of them. So if we go back to the beginning and we ask, what did Korach take? I think if we really pay attention to the Torah, we see that Korach really took nothing, because Korach was grasping. Korach was grasping because he didn't want to be in his own self and his own life. It's written in Ethics of the Father, who is wealthy? Who is Ashir? The person who is Sameach B'chalko, the person who is happy in their own portion. But it's so hard to be part, right? It's so hard to be part and see someone else who has a different part and someone else who has a different part, and then we're sort of not willing to be our part or have our part because we want their part. So I have some friends, like I say often to Keith, like, oh my God, you're so talented, right? He's a musician and an artist and it is, and I kind of wish I had what Keith had. And yet in my stronger moments, I just celebrate my friends' strengths and their abilities and their talents, and I'm willing to be who I am in what I can do and give this world. Sorry. So can we embrace the whole catastrophe, as Nikos Kazantzakis says in Zorba the Greek? Here we are, as we are, in all our pride, headed towards the promise, if we are willing to be exactly who we are.